welcome to our next session entitled Trust in Mobile, sponsored by GMS. So we will spend the next hour together talking about what I think is the hottest topic in the next decade, which is security and trust. And as images are worth 1,000 words, I will ask you to sit back, relax, and spend the next minute thinking about what that really means. So as I conclude my video, I said, it's now or never the time to work together and cooperate to create trusted ecosystems. So let's get started. And what better way to get started to get the panel on stage and our introduction speaker, the CEO of GMS, Charles Upchurch. People, come on stage, join me.
So thank you very much. Welcome to our very important session and topic today. GMS is proud to sponsor it. We talk about trust in mobile. We really talk about trust in enterprise messaging. Enterprises logically want the lowest messaging cost possible. Operators want the highest possible enterprise messaging revenue. That dichotomy, unfortunately, leads to fraud in our industry. And this fraud is damaging the reputation of the entire industry. And as an industry, we have to work together to protect our reputation. And in order to do that, we have to work to the highest ethical standards to ensure trust in enterprise messaging. The MEF is an important vehicle for this effort. The MEF SMS Code of Conduct is a good start, but it needs to have accelerated adoption, and we need to reinforce it by having consequences for misconduct. So today we have a brilliant panel of anti-fraud experts. I'm thrilled and humbled to be amongst them. My hope is that they can stimulate thought leadership on this topic, and that we continue progress towards trust in enterprise messaging. Thank you.
So I would like to welcome our esteemed experts on stage for our panel. Please join me. So as they come and join us on stage, I just want to say this panel is entitled Trust in Mobile. So the first question really we should ask ourselves is, what does trust mean in our industry? So in my little video, I said trust is the belief in the reliability, the truth, and the capability of a person, a company, and in our case, an ecosystem.
Okay, we'll go down there.
Okay.
You stay over there.
No, you're not going to run away from me. I'm following you. So yes, an ecosystem. And I said that the next decade will be the decade of trust and security. And also, I think it will be the decade of the ecosystem business model. So the ones that master both the trust and the ecosystem business model, I think will lead the big tech decade that we are entering right now. So we are very lucky today because the first thing we need to do to get things started is to talk about the problem and then work together to find solutions. And but you know me guys, I talk about the real thing, no BS, and I will make sure that this panel follows the same rules because we have to talk about the real stuff, the real things. So no pressure, guys. But I know that will not be a problem. So for those of you who do not know these experts, I'm sure there's not many of you out there that don't. We have Virginie Debris. She's Chief Product Officer of GMS. We have Katia Gonzalez. She's Head of Fraud and Security at Bix. We have Brendan Cleary, CEO of Celesis. And we have Etienne Dupont, who is Senior Director of Business Messaging Solutions at Rakuten Viber. And of course, we have our esteemed sponsor, Charles Upchurch. So obviously, we want to start by the beginning. And the beginning is to say, where are we at today? What's the situation at the moment in terms of the biggest security risk, the biggest fraud threats? What are the risks that are growing the fastest? Where are we today? What are we faced with? So maybe, Virginie, you can get us started with that?
So I think there are multiple fraud issues that we've faced for the past years. So many of them are well known. A few things are important and I think kind of brand new. I would talk first about signaling. Signaling is obviously the path, the transport path, which is used for SMS. And using the signaling could be a threat because some third parties could use the signaling in order to get the information of the end users. So that's a threat. That could also be an opportunity though, because of course then we could use that information in order to improve the personal data and information, the KYC. So that's also an opportunity as such. I think that another phenomenon that we've seen is the smishing. I think the previous panel mentioned about it, another French guy, so many French people today. Alexandre mentioned about it. Smishing is an issue, that's the SMS phishing, so exactly like email is an issue because you're receiving all those URLs that people have to click in. SMS so far had not been impacted by that, and the more smishing there is, the less trust there is in our messaging industry, and that's a concern that we have to fight against. I believe that Brendan would talk about that later. The third phenomenon that we've seen, which is brand new, is the flash call. Flash calling is so could be considered as fraud by the operators, could also be considered as an opportunity, because that's clearly another way to identify people and to connect and to push the one-time PIN. So for those who don't know that, this is really a quick call and usually a call that doesn't go through, which is containing the one-time PIN within the caller ID. So these are new phenomenon that could also be, again, as opportunities that we could imagine. So that's what I could see in the past.
Actually, I have customers of mine that use flash call as a service,
Exact.
as an opportunity.
Exact.
But and also it is
you understand always the double-edged sword, right? You have to transform, and I think that's also our job, to transform those threats into opportunities for all the parties, because I think in our business what's important is that everybody has to be win-win. We can't have the enterprises on one side beneficiating from one thing and the MNOs suffering from that, because it cannot last long. What's important is that all the parties are going to beneficiate from that. So that's where companies like GMS are trying to find solutions in order to put the right balance and put the traffic towards the right direction so that everybody could beneficiate from that. Again, the win-win is important.
Okay. What about from the carrier operator side, Katia? What do you see? Where are we at the moment?
So I think that if we take one step back and we look at how things are evolving in the past, especially the past couple of years, there's been an acceleration on all these SMS frauds that Virginie was talking about, but also on all the other frauds. And what we are seeing is that this trend where the surface of the attacks is growing dramatically. So not only because fraudsters really target any single service or technology that we have, but because of these new technologies that we are bringing as an industry, they offer new opportunities for these guys, and they exploit each and every one of them. So it's becoming, as an industry, very important that we consider all this holistic perspective and that we don't focus on one single kind of attacks, because these guys, they really try to, spread it as much as possible. They make money out of it, so the more they spread it, the more money they make. It's quite simple. But for us, we need to really get ready for that, increased volume of attacks, and that it really gets onto any possible service out there. And it's because it's really increasing as a surface of attack that we also see an increase in the parties that are impacted. And that's what I think is so dangerous for us. So for many years, we've had different frauds on voice, on SMS, on signaling. And it was mainly operators, carriers, aggregators that were impacted. Now, what is, in my opinion, becoming a dramatic threat is that end users, consumers, and thus enterprises are starting to be hit. I don't think any of you here has been safe from any of these phishing attacks, missed call campaigns, or anything of that kind. Everybody's impacted. And this is what I believe is driving so much this lack of trust. I mean, telecommunications, and that's the big threat for all of us, is kind of becoming an unsecure means of communication, of working, and that's traumatic for us.
And I agree. I think I've met a lot of the carriers and operators here this week so far, and a lot of them are talking to me about multi-service, bundling, and so on. So initially it was mostly voice fraud. It's moved to messaging fraud. And I actually met a few people last night over a drink, and we started talking about, can you imagine how we're going to secure the metaverse? Whatever it will be, we don't know what it is, but can you imagine, we're having trouble securing voice messaging. When we get to the metaverse, how is that going to happen? So there's a lot to be done. But so now we've looked at where we are at now. So how do we deal with that? What should we start to do? I mean, there's a lot of things that have been done already. But, I believe, as I said in my presentation initially, that the next decade will be the decade of the ecosystem. And creating a trusted ecosystem is extremely complex. Just creating a secure company, your own network, that's already complex enough. So how do we go about creating trusted ecosystem? I don't know, Brendan, what do you want to say?
Sure. I think if you look at trust in general, it's really what drives the subscriber behavior. If they don't trust the channel that they're receiving this communication on, they're just not going to use it. So you've seen, people that I've been talking to kind of consequently that say, well, if I don't recognize a number that's calling me, I'm just not going to answer. So we can see the kind of damage that can have. So not all problems in the telecommunication world are very visible to the end subscribers, but we're now starting to see that leaking out into the general public. So as we said here before, smishing, voice calls, robocalls. So this is really where we really need to do something about it before we get to an inflection point where people stop trusting the services that they do rely on. The operators and telecommunications are in a very privileged position. They are seen as a trusted entity rather than, let's say, a private enterprise which may or may not be incorporated in the country that you are talking to them in. So they feel that it's trusted, so it's important that we do protect it. How do we go about protecting it? Really, it's getting visibility first. So knowing the kinds of problems that exist on the network. Are you being affected? How badly am I being affected? And what can I do about it then? So obviously, from our perspective from Cellulus, being a signaling security provider, we would be about signaling firewalls and actually viewing the signaling that's going back and forward that's actually delivering these services. But I think on a more broader perspective, it's about collaboration. So no one individually will be able to solve all of these problems because the networks here, they're very big, they're very complex, they're very intricated, and there's a lot of players in them as well. So it used to be the case that there was only a few privileged companies that could access, SS7 or anything like that. But now you're getting message providers, you're getting MVNOs, you're getting a lot of different players, so the attack surface is bigger. So if you want to come up with a way of protecting the industry in general, you've got to work with people in the ecosystem together to make it better. So I think, for us anyway, I mean, the partnerships are just a key facet of that. So talking about smishing that came up before as a concrete example, we are very, very good at signaling. We're not very good at looking at a URL, assessing a website. Is there a phishing kit in there? Is it a trusted website or is it a malicious website? So, partnering with a company that does that exclusively and does it very, very well, and bringing that expertise that we can bring, which is interception and enforcement on signaling, including SMS, is a very novel way to actually combat something like that. So it's really about engaging the marketplace, coming to these conferences, having an open mind and trying to solve it together, as things may or may not be solved in silos for one individual cases. But as Katja mentioned earlier, things are changing all the time. So you need to come up with a more robust framework or approach to actually securing all of these infrastructures.
Charles, what do you think? Do you want to add anything to this?
This is a very broad topic, but it's very clear that fraud is growing. There's too much motivation. The fraudsters have become very good. They're very clever. They're very agile. They're very fast. And all of our panelists here that are anti-fraud experts are working hard to put in solutions. I know for one of our customers in Bangladesh recently, we've created automated testing. We've tied it in with the automated blocking from Cellusys' firewall, and now we've got 99.8% coverage of trust in enterprise messaging, and we've been able to block the gray routes and the fraud. But it's a constant effort.
Yes, I agree. And Brendan, you touched on something about cooperation. I know like the organizations such as the GLF, they have a group that trying to address fraud. You have code of conducts that you want to sign. I think you're talking about something similar at MEF. Do you think that really works? I know we had the discussion that we were not agreeing all the time, but is that the first step to create these groups, sign codes of conducts?
Yeah, I think you need to bring awareness of security and what you need to do to implement these good things that a lot of people in the industry are doing. Security is never really considered, the first thing that, let's say, a lot of players want to look at, because some people view it as a cost center. So if they're looking at their kind of business plans, business models, launching new services, launching everything else, security isn't really first and foremost. So I think bringing in these things like code of conduct and having these conversations, it makes people more aware, at least, and will bring some of the benefits that can come with it as well. I think basically saying, look, we should be securing these things because it's the right thing to do, and that is true. But if you can also bring a business case attached to it as well, that is a way to kind of raise it up in the priority of the various people in an industry to actually invest in security. So raising that awareness through that collaboration, through these initiatives, through meeting with each other and making it more important, and then removing reasons as to why they wouldn't do it, yes, I think is going to make a difference.
And those,
Yes,
if I may, Isabel,
yes.
those working groups are important because we exchange information with each other, right? In those working groups, James creating that fraud working group is important because then for us, it's a way to exchange with our. So you talked about the ecosystem. That's the vendors, that's the carriers, messaging providers like us, enterprise customers, OTT players. All those people are part and parcel of those problems, right? And also part of the solution. So it's not only GMS, it's also Sinch, it's Infobip, it's whoever else we might have into those working groups that are also exchanging with each others and give tips to each others. Because thanks to that, we are getting better. We are educating ourselves. That's what's important as well.
So Etienne, you've survived it so far without me going to pick on you, but now at the time.
I was trying to.
So I guess you probably have a different point of view, which is why it's interesting, because everyone keeps saying everything starts and ends with the customer.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the customer, the end user? What needs to take place to,
Yeah, obviously
to
we
build
have
trust?
we have a particular positioning, meaning that being a messaging applications, we are directly in front of the user, so which means that even if sometimes we are not the reasons of the fraud, we will be the first ones users we face, and we'll say, okay, I get fraud from on Viber, so I will talk first to Vibers, even if we have not been the main reason of the fraud. And I mean Vibers, data protection, user privacy is part of Viber DNS from very beginnings. We provide a lot of tools for users to protect their data with end-to-end encryptions by default on private group chat, disappearing message, and many other features. So we are building this trust as an applications for the users they can use on a regular basis, daily basis to manage their ongoing conversations. Our ambitions on the brand side is to build these safe environments where on one side brands can send their message on Vibers the same way they've been doing on SMS or on other channels with a high level of protections, and explain to the users at the same time why they're receiving the message, how they can differentiate a legit business from a non-legit business. I mean, some of the issue of fraud we are on our side experiencing as a communication platform is more, spam, scam. This is kind of fraud that, on the user perspective, they are going to feel. And there are a lot of work to be done on our side, also on the brand side. I mean, on our side, build user experience to the users where they can better identify what is a potential fraud, how they can action it, how they can report it, how they can block it, etc. And use it in a way they understand it. Because fraud, experts usually use very high terminology, but from a users that don't have any big expertise on it, we need to use a terminology that they can understand. And on the other side, there is also a tremendous work to be done on the brand, with the brands, to really explain them, and particularly on the rich business area, how they can leverage all this new ecosystem in order not to completely destruct this trust, in order to use best practices, in order not to send irrelevant message, to make sure they have the valid consent of the users when they are sending message, and not just sending bulk message which doesn't really make sense. And particularly in a messaging, that messaging app that is very private, where they have most of their private chats. And if they tend to receive dozens of messages from the brand that are relevant, they will block it, and you will never have the chance, to rebuild this trust. So this is something that brands really needs to work, and partners like GMS with Infobip, etc. This is also part of the role to explain this.
Because I guess information is power. So part of it is to educate the end user, but everyone through the value chain, not just the end user, the operators. Because I was talking to one of my customers yesterday, and they said one of the things they're doing now is, they're going in, they're helping them understand how much fraud they're suffering from, where is it. So just the realization, the operators probably don't realize the amount of fraud that they're being impacted by. So the first thing is information. Now I understand where it is, how much is it. And then I realize, it is definitely worth for me to do something. And then, but it's going end to end to the value chain, which is what is complex. Everyone has to be working together to achieve that, because often little bits in the middle of the ecosystem that maybe do not want to be working as much with the others. I'm not, but it's true. It's the reality of an ecosystem.
But that's why those working groups within the MEF are important. MEF and other groups, by the way. But that's why this exchange of information is important. Awareness for the customers, but along the chain, because genuinely many people are not aware of many things.
No.
But even beyond this share of information, it's about creating the visibility. Okay, there are parties out there that are willing to publicly sign a code of conduct that maybe is imperfect, but it's there and has the merit to exist. And it's a public statement of we want to commit to work in an ethical way, to work with the right people in the right way to deliver value to our customers instead of risk. And again, we can all do things better, but it's already a commitment. And that creates also visibility on, any party out there that does want to work in a safe and more secure way. Okay, who are the parties I can be working with more securely? Well, these are these.
So it brings us to the end of our panel, because I would have replied to that, as you know, but saved by the bell. So it brings us to my last question, and I like to finish my panels on a call to action. So I will ask you this question, I will ask you to reply in one word or a small phrase. So for people out there looking or watching our panel, what is the one concrete action that they need to take to make a trusted ecosystem happen? Because I believe in stop talking, start acting, and all of us have something to do to make this happen. So each of you, what is the one thing they should think of? Brendan?
For me, again, it's collaboration. Be open and honest to try to solve these problems. Say you're having problems and working with the players in industry to actually solve them.
Katia?
I would say the same. I've been, preaching for collaboration for many years. I'm not going to change now. So honest collaboration. Yeah.
Dozini?
I agree on that. I would add, please ensure that your vendors, partners have signed the code of conduct of the MEF. And please make sure that they respect that. Thank you, James. And we are going to make sure at MEF, because the board is all about that we're going to enforce that. We absolutely want this to be important for the ecosystem. We know that these are ethical, important matters for the ecosystem, and we're going to reinforce that one way or another. We're going to find a way to do that.
Okay, Etienne?
I would say education.
Education.
Right.
Charles, anything?
So under the umbrella of our industry association, the MEF, we need to accelerate the adoption of this code of conduct, but we absolutely have to be able to enforce it, and that means we have to add consequences for misconduct.
Ah, you're my man. I agree. And I guess I always have to say my own word. So I guess I would act to that. The code of conduct is the first step. Maybe the next step is to agree on and implement standards and processes throughout the ecosystem that will ensure that trust is built at every step of the way. So that's my 2 cents today. Maybe tomorrow will be a different one. So thank you very much. You're staying on stage, because if you have any questions, please keep them. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. So just keep your questions for now, because we're going to invite our next guest.